Let's read from the book of Obadiah. This is the King James Version, chapter 1, verse 20. And the captivity of this host of the children of Israel shall possess that of the Canaanites, even unto Sarepta. And the captivity of Jerusalem, which is in Sepharad, shall possess the cities of the south. So the key parts we're going to be focusing on is the captivity of Jerusalem and where was Sepharad. I'd also like to read a short summary for the book of Obadiah so we get some context. Obadiah, one of the 12 minor prophets, announces judgment on the nation of Edom for its sins against Judah and Jerusalem. Specifically, the prophet denounces Edom for gloating over the destruction of Jerusalem by the Babylonians in 587 BCE. So it's important for us to know the context and the history, the Babylonian captivity and the conquest by Nebuchadnezzar, and accuses Edom of looting Jerusalem and handing over her fugitives. For these sins, says the prophet, Edom itself will be destroyed. This prophetic book, the shortest book in the Old Testament, ends by speaking of the day of the Lord, when the nations will be defeated, Israel will be restored, and the kingdom shall be the Lord's. Now that we have some context, I want to remind us of what we were speaking about in the previous video with the plains of Sennaar in the land of Sudan. And considering this region for the biblical land of Shinar, we were speaking about the fact that we seem to have the right landscape or the right description for this region. But what about history? Do we have history to support this layout or this picture that we're building? What I'm going to do is I'm going to move this to the other side because we're going to be speaking about the Iberian Peninsula. What is the connection with Bible history and the Iberian Peninsula? To start this off, we're going to speak about the prophet Jonah. We know that the prophet Jonah fled to Tarshish, and there's different theories about where biblical Tarshish could have been. But the strongest connections are with the Iberian Peninsula, with the semi-mythological kingdom of Tartessos. And the connection to Spain is so strong, or seems to be so strong, that we even have a Bible. This is the Good News Bible, which substitutes Tarshish for Spain. And this is from the book of Jonah, chapter 1, verse 3, where it says, Jonah, however, set out in the opposite direction in order to get away from the Lord. He went to Joppa, where he found a ship about to go to Spain. He paid his fare and went aboard with the crew to sail to Spain, where he would be away from the Lord. So in the time of Jonah, we have knowledge of Tarshish. And is it actually the Iberian Peninsula? Is it Spain? Just for our learning, so we have a rough idea of when this could have been taking place, we given this date 786 to 746 BC for the reign of King Jeroboam II, and the prophet Jonah is mentioned in 2 Kings during the reign of this king. So we have an approximate date for these events. But what I also want to focus on is the captivity of Jerusalem, which is what we read with the book of Obadiah. Okay, I want to go to a different source. This one is called The History of the Jews of Spain and Portugal from the Earliest Times. And I'm just going to read it as it's written and then stick with that expression sometimes throughout the video. Okay, it says, some authors of high authority and to whom the greatest scholarship cannot be denied, entertain the opinion that Jews existed in Spain from the earliest times. So we've already read an example of the prophet Jonah fleeing to Tarshish. Let's carry on. Mariana and some other Spanish historians date the establishment of the Jews after the destruction of Jerusalem and the temple by Nebuchadnezzar, and that many came to Hispania, which is another name for Spain, or the way of saying Spain, with Hispan, who had accompanied him as an auxiliary in his expedition against Judea. So now we're actually getting some very interesting information here that the actual establishment of the Jews in this region, according to this source, was happening in the time of King Nebuchadnezzar, which will be important for how it's connecting with the Bible prophecy, with the captivity of Jerusalem. So this is going to be very important now, because we're starting to learn now about this history of the Bible and how it's connected to the Iberian Peninsula. But what about the Babylonian Empire and King Nebuchadnezzar? Did King Nebuchadnezzar have a relationship, influence, power over this region in order to send the captivity to this region? This is going to be very important. I'd like to show you a few sources that we've come across. Okay, this one is on the page speaking about the Nubian or the Ethiopian pharaoh. Just get the right pronunciation. So Tarakos or Tirko or Tarku. So that's the page that we're on. But we get some very interesting information down the bottom here. I can just find where I had it. So it's this part here. So it says that Nebuchadnezzar, who enjoyed greater repute among the Chaldeans than Hercules, led an army even as far as the Pillars. Now when it says the Pillars, that's speaking about the Pillars of Hercules, also known as the Straits of Gibraltar. So we have this source saying that King Nebuchadnezzar campaigned as far as we could say as the Iberian Peninsula. And then that starts to make sense with the history that we're reading of the Bible, with the captivity of Jerusalem and this establishment of the Jews in Spain. Okay, I want to show you another one. This one, it says, and Abidinus fabled that Nebuchadnezzar, having subdued Africa and Spain, brought these Iberi from Spain. Now, I just want to pick this one part out. We can't explore what it's talking about with the Iberi. It'll take us off course. But now we have a different source speaking about Nebuchadnezzar conquering Africa and Spain. Now, when it says Africa, this could be referring to this region. This was the Roman province of Africa. So I don't think it's saying that he conquered the whole continent. It could be a certain territory that was known as Africa, and then also Spain. And I think there was one more example where it speaks about, again, Nebuchadnezzar exceeding Hercules and conquering a great part of Africa and Spain. So this is very important, because thinking about this captivity of Jerusalem and this connection of the Bible history with the Iberian Peninsula. And we actually are getting sources that connect the Babylonian Empire or King Nebuchadnezzar campaigning to this region, conquering or subduing large parts of this region. And that would be important for it actually to make sense. How can you send a captivity to a certain region, or if you want to say a deportation of captives, if you don't have a relationship or some level of influence or power over that region? But I want to go back to the source where it says fabled. The idea that it must be a fable. Why is it written this way? if we go to a map showing the empire for Nebuchadnezzar, so the Babylonian Empire, this is what we presented with for the empire, for the history, and we notice the region that is predominantly in the Middle East, stretching towards the modern-day country of Turkey. So we can understand why these sources that we're coming across will be described as fables, because it doesn't look realistic that this Babylonian Empire would be reaching towards Spain, or that we would have King Nebuchadnezzar campaigning as far as Spain. It just doesn't work with this picture. So then those accounts or those sources would be considered fables or legendary. But with the picture that we're working on and we're busy building, considering this different region for the land of Shinar from the Bible, this history that we're reading with King Nebuchadnezzar campaigning as far as the Pillars of Hercules, subduing Africa and parts of Spain, can actually make sense and work with our layout. And is it actually what the Bible is telling us with the Bible prophecy from the book of Obadiah? Because it says that this captivity of Jerusalem, which is in Sepharad. Now we're going to investigate Sepharad and the connection to Spain or the Iberian Peninsula. The origin of the name Sepharad. We're going to read most of this abstract because it's very important. And again, we're going to read it as it's written. Since the period of Roman antiquity, Spanish Jews gave the name Sepharad to the Iberian Peninsula. The descendants of Iberian Jews refer to themselves as Sephardim and identify Spain as Sepharad in modern Hebrew. We've spoken about the book of Obadiah, the first time it appears as a biblical place. There are, however, Persian inscriptions that refer to two places called Sparda, one an area in Media and the other Sardis, the ancient capital of Lydia in Asia Minor. I just want to show you this page on not Sardis but Lydia, where the satrapy of Lydia was called Sparda. So we're going to speak about this word Sparda as well. Furthermore, some scholars defend the theory that the biblical Sepharad could be situated in Libya. So that's interesting. The most widely accepted hypothesis is that it might have been Sardis, but the connection between the name Sepharad referring to the Iberian Peninsula and the Sepharad that appears in the Bible is not clear. Neither has the idea that Sepharad could be identified with Sardis been satisfactorily explained. Now this next sentence could be very important the way it's written. Finally, even in the case that we accept that Sepharad was Sardis, it is difficult to explain the relation that there could have been between the Iberian Peninsula and the ancient capital of Lydia. So isn't that very interesting when we think about our video on Lud, son of Shem? So the region we're looking for Lud, but then also the Lydians and the kingdom of Lydia. I'll put that video in the description below if you'd like to watch that video, and some of the other recent videos that we've done if you're interested in how we are building this map. So that's very interesting how that's worded, because for the map that we're building, it's not strange with what we're considering. And I'll put the link for this PDF in the description as well if you'd like to read it. Okay, from Sepharad to Hispania to the Iberian Peninsula. So we're doing quite a bit of reading, but it's important that we get these details and try and learn what's going on here. The Aramaic translators translated the biblical term Sepharad in Obadiah 1:20 into Hispania. It seems that the Targum Jonathan, the official Aramaic translation of the prophetic books made by Jonathan ben Uzziel, is the first work where this translation appears. And it says this could be the ultimate source for why we get Sepharad being the name for the Iberian Peninsula. According to Sperber's edition, Sepharad becomes Hispania or Hispania, and we know it as Spain today. Just read a few more things from here. Sepharad is also translated as Hispania in the Peshitta, the standard version of the Syriac Christian Bible, which was probably written in the 2nd century CE. And it says, why did the first Aramaic translators identify Sepharad as Hispania? Now, part of the answer, or an explanation that is given, is could it be connected to the Hesperides, nymphs of the West? So now we're in the Greek mythology. They were also called the Atlantides, from their reputed father Atlas. Could this be the answer? Let's read about this. Okay, I think I want to read from, so this part of here when it speaks about the Greek mythology. In Greek mythology, the Hesperides were nymphs who tended a garden in a far western corner of the world. Some authors located them near the Atlas Mountains in North Africa. And then we also have this connection to Tartessos, southern Spain, which we've already seen connected to Tarshish from the Bible. Thus, the Hesperides were generally understood as living in a far western place of the known world. So what I'd like to do is just show you a graphic that I created to try, or so we can try see what's been said here. Okay, so I've written Hesperides, but we're focusing on these letters S, P, R, D, and then how we see that in the name Sepharad, how we also see it in the name Sparta. And remember, this was what the Persians referred to as the satrapy of Lydia, Sparta. And then we also see it with Sardis, but closer with this variation, Sphardis. That's why I had this page open for Sardis. We see here, we have this variation here, Sphardis. And with that variation, you can really see that word, or hear it, Sepharad. But do these words all connect together? And is it because of the Hesperides? Is that where it's coming from? And that would be the key detail, because the Hesperides, as we read, are connected with the western regions of the world. So North Africa with the Atlas Mountains, with the Iberian Peninsula. So if the Hesperides are connected with this region, and this is where the word Sepharad could be coming from, then we can see why there's this connection with Sepharad and Spain. And that's important because is that what is being spoken of in the book of Obadiah when it says, if we just remind ourselves that it says, and the captivity of Jerusalem, which is in Sepharad, shall possess the cities of the south. So is it saying Spain because of this connection with the Hesperides? Now the source is not saying that this is definitive. It's just a theory. It does say, if we go back, that it could be because of unconscious confusion. So the scholar is not saying that this is definitely true, but it does make a lot of sense of all these things that we've been uncovering and speaking about in this video. So now we're going to try, just think about all these different things and try to summarize what we've learned so far. Let's recap what we could be learning. We read about the Spanish historians speaking about the history of the Jews and Spain, that it could go back to the earliest of times. And this establishment could have been in the time of King Nebuchadnezzar and the destruction of Jerusalem. So then it connects to what it seems like it could connect to this Bible prophecy from the book of Obadiah. We also learned about those accounts of King Nebuchadnezzar campaigning as far as the pillars. We read accounts about the fact that he may have conquered these regions of North Africa and Spain. And then does that actually make sense with the information, with the history that we're reading, that in order for there to be a captivity and for what we're reading here with this establishment of the Jews in Spain, does there not need to be some sort of a relationship between Babylon and Spain in order for that to happen? Some sort of influence or even power over the region in order to send the captives into that region. So that's also important. And then we also were reading how the Aramaic translators translated the biblical term Sepharad in Obadiah 120 into Hispania. So then if we go back to the prophecy, it matches up that the Bible could be saying that this captivity of Jerusalem, which is in Spain, would then work and match up with what we're reading from the Spanish historians of why there was this early establishment of the Jews on the Iberian Peninsula. But then it's also having an impact on other kingdoms and other empires, because the satrapy of Lydia being called Sparta, could this word Sparta also be connected with Sepharad? And then would we be looking for this kingdom of Lydia to the west, which is very interesting because that's the region that we were looking for, Lud, son of Shem, without interpretation from the Book of Jubilees. So that's very interesting that this is the region that we were looking for, Lud, but we read that for the academics, for the scholars, this is very difficult to explain this relation. But with our picture, it's actually something that we are looking at. And then the theory, could this all be connected back to the Hesperides? Which is very interesting because the Hesperides are connected to the western regions, North Africa, the Atlas Mountains, and the Iberian Peninsula. So it could be very important. And we did say when we started the video, could there be a history that supports this picture or this layout? And now we do see with this video that there could be a history that works with this picture. And is it resonating with what the Bible is telling us? For this last part of the video, I would like to give us some food for thought in terms of our playlist on civilization. I'd like to think about what makes a civilization. We have here some certain characteristics. Okay, so we should have large population centers, monumental architecture and unique art styles, shared communication strategies, systems for administering territories, a complex division of labor, and the division of people into social and economic classes. For this video, I'd like to focus on monumental architecture and then also the social and economic classes. These are some famous examples of monumental architecture that's given on this search. And this definition, I'd like to read this part. Its principal defining feature is that its scale and elaboration exceed the requirements of any practical functions that a building is intended to perform. So then what are the reasons for constructing these monuments if it's not actually practical? So the question I want to ask, if there wants to be any discussion in the comment section, is, with this being a defining characteristic, or one of these characteristics that define civilization, or should we say mankind's idea of civilization, does that mean that exploitation and slavery will go hand in hand with civilization? Because who's going to be building these cities, these monuments, And should we not be, well, we shouldn't be surprised if we do see maybe this exploitation or unfairness inbuilt into the society. So if we go to Egypt, we see at the top we have the pharaoh, then the vizier, nobles and priests, scribes and soldiers, then the craftsmen, and the lowest level, farmers and slaves. And if we go to another famous civilization with the Sumerians, again at the top we see high priests and nobles, then officials, scribes and minor priests, craftsmen, and in the lowest level, servants, laborers and peasants. And if we go to the Vedic world, again at the top we see priests, then the warriors and rulers. So similar to Egypt, where we have the soldiers or the warriors higher up, and then skilled traders, merchants and minor officials, unskilled workers, and the lowest in the Vedic world, even having a class called the outcasts or the untouchables. So what do you think about these levels of society and the question, is exploitation actually inbuilt with the society and what makes a civilization, and will it not also feed into war and conquest? Because in order to have a slave class, you may need to conquer other regions or other peoples to bring in those that can do the work that certain levels of society, don't want to do that work because they're above that level of work. Because we have been speaking in this video about captivity and conquest, you could say that we need a warrior class or soldiers to defend our land or to defend our territory. But if you have a society that's built this way, where you actually need slaves as a part of your structure, then your soldiers could then be used in a different way, not for defense, but actual conquest. So I look forward to seeing if you want to share any comments about that. We haven't spoken about what makes civilization, the good and the bad, the merits. And also we'll look to see if there's any comments with our discussion on Sepharad and the captivity of Jerusalem and the Iberian Peninsula. So yeah, thank you for watching this video. Thank you to those that support the channel and like the videos. And hopefully we'll see you in another video.